In April of 2018, we saw the debut of IDW Sonic the Hedgehog comic, following the cancellation of Archie's long-running incarnation of the Blue Blur. As somebody who was a pretty big fan of the Archie book, I was very happy to learn we'd be getting a new series, but it was slightly bittersweet because that meant that the universe that I had come to love so much, despite some of the dumber things they had done, was no longer around.
Ian Flynn, who had masterminded much of what I loved about that series, was brought back onto the IDW book, but a part of me was still slightly worried it just wouldn't be the same. A year into the book's run, I'm very happy to say that those worries have long since been put to rest. IDW Sonic has nailed the feel of the Archie book and brought with it very few of the issues that series had near the end of its run. By the time the book came to a close, Archie Sonic had started stumbling. A lot. I credit most of that to Ken Penders being a massive dick and getting all whiny about his characters and causing a reboot, after which a lot of scrambling had to be done to try and establish this new timeline. Newer stories weren't terrible, but they weren't to the level of quality that had become the standard, and far too often new characters would be introduced and not seen again.
Reading a new Archie Sonic story was not that different from one of the games at this point. Not necessarily bad, but very underwhelming, and you just know that it can do better.
The Archie comics had always been what I feel is the perfect way to tell stories set in the Sonic universe. Many of the series' plots could fit reasonably well into one of the games, just with actual storyline and characters that were more than just a personality trait or two. IDW Sonic so far is doing a fantastic job following that same style, and under IDW it seems they're able to do things that Archie wouldn't have dared to, especially not near the end of their run. While there were a few isolated moments like toying with killing Antoine and actually killing Tommy Turtle, Archie Sonic never really got what I would call heavy or dark, and while IDW hasn't done anything that'll traumatize anyone, there have been some kinda grim bits. Amy references that people have died in the fight against Eggman, new villain Dr. Starline basically gives a reformed Eggman mental trauma to turn him back to normal, and Eggman creates a virus that can roboticize just through contact. That last one is especially notable, as being roboticized had always been treated as very traumatic, and turning that into a virus that can spread so easily really shows just how twisted Eggman can be. And making him a truly threatening villain is another thing Archie Sonic was very good at. I believe this is best exemplified by the aforementioned death of Tommy Turtle. You don't need to know the circumstances that led to his death, all you need to know is that Eggman killed him so hard, he was nothing but dust, and then basically went, alright then, let's go. His lack of empathy for just about any living being made him honestly pretty chilling at points. Such are the benefits of being a robot, I suppose.
IDW Sonic so far has felt like a natural evolution of the Archie book, bolstered, I feel, by IDW being willing to do a little bit more than Archie did, as Archie tended to stay pretty all ages. And that isn't to say that the IDW book isn't all ages, it just doesn't feel like they're holding back as much as Archie had.
It's not all perfect, however. Sega has taken a much more active role in the book this time, and as such, they've placed some restrictions on it. They had plenty in the Archie days, especially post-reboot, and a lot of those are still around, plus some new ones. For one, classic and modern Sonic are not allowed to mix. So, if you were a fan of how the Archie series reintroduced forgotten characters, like, say, Mighty or Ray, you won't be seeing them, or indeed anything from before Sonic Adventure, in the IDW series. Thankfully, while they may be holding back on use of some game characters, Sega doesn't appear to be limiting new characters, and we've already got plenty of good ones just from the first year. In villains, we've got the less than intelligent, but still very entertaining Rough and Tumble, a dastardly duo with a Team Rocket-esque rhyming introduction, and the cunning Dr. Starline, an Eggman fanboy more than willing to assist in the good Doctor's more sadistic plans, and armed with a twisted mind of his own. And they've also introduced a couple of new heroes. Tangle the Lemur is a massive dork who has been absolutely wonderful, and in her short time in the book is already one of my favorite characters in the franchise, and Whisper the Wolf has caught my interest mostly because we don't know much about her at this point, and I am a sucker for characters like that.
In the Archie book, many of its strongest characters came from outside the games, and while we haven't had a whole lot of exposure to them due to the book focusing more on the game characters and world building thus far, if the impression its original characters have made is any indication, the same will be true for this book.
IDW Sonic reminds me greatly of what I consider to be the best era of the Archie series, spanning from about issue 160 to the reboot at issue 252. That whole chunk of the book is, in my opinion, the perfect way to tell Sonic stories, encapsulating the feel of the more enjoyable game plots like Unleashed and the adventure games, but giving it some actual meat and development. Reading those stories always gave me this warm feeling inside, like when you were a kid and you got up early to watch those cartoons on Saturday that Sonic feels so much like. It was something sorely missing from the end of the Archie run, and I now get that same feeling from the IDW series.
I should make it clear though that while the IDW book does remind me very much of the Archie series, by no means does it feel like a copy of that book. It has its own unique flair that I can't quite put my finger on. It just feels very fresh.
And taking place after Sonic Forces also helps the book stand out, I feel. That game features really the only time Eggman's been on top, with him actually managing to conquer the world. Having the comics follow that gives the series a feeling of the characters needing to pick up the pieces, as it were, to rebuild and get things back to how they were before it all went nigh on apocalyptic. With this comes a bit of a more dour tone, but that just helps IDW Sonic stand out more from Archie Sonic. Some of the early issues even show how the events of the game affected just regular citizens of the definitely not Mobius planet Sonic and his buddies inhabit. It's extra little details and world building like that that really give the comics universe life. I always said this about the Archie book, and it seems I'll be continuing to say it about IDW. If you're a fan of the games and want actual stories involving the characters, you should be reading the comics. If you think the game's characters are too one-note and need more development, you should be reading the comics. And now is a better time than ever to get into them, as this series has no connection to the Archie universe, and you don't have nearly 20 years worth of backstory to go through just to know what's going on.
And if, like me, you are a fan of the Archie series, but still have some reservations about the new book, let me assure you that while it hasn't completely taken the place of Archie, it is very much on the way to doing so, and is very worth your time. That's all for now, and I will see you guys next time.
With this comes a bit of a more dour tone, but that just helps IDW Sonic stand out more from Archie Sonic. Let me tell you about these Sonics, these Sonic comics.